Hello, welcome
So,
everybody. This is Blake from DZone. We've got some special guests with us today. We're talking DevOps challenges with our latest article, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Alireza.
thank you. I'm Alireza, a site reliability engineer from 5 Degrees. And yeah, maybe first we can ask our guests to introduce themselves, and then we can start to hear the stories they have for us. So Jeffrey, maybe you can start, introduce yourself for our audiences.
I'm Jeffrey Fredrick. I'm managing director at a fintech company in London called Tim, formerly a CTO there, and I'm recently author of the recently published Agile Conversations.
Thank you for joining us. James?
Hi everyone, I'm James, founder of Rebellion Consulting. I've been in the technology space for in excess of 20 years, and I work with large organizations and their senior leadership teams around agile transformation, digital and adoption of DevOps and kind of more modern practices in traditional enterprises.
Thank you for joining us. Justin?
I'm a software engineer over a company called Catalogic in northern New Jersey, and I've probably been doing software development around 9 to 10 years now, and writing for DZone for probably about 4 to 5.
Thank you to be with us. And Zoe?
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. I'm Xavier. I'm from Madrid. I'm currently working as a technical leader at Altran and researching in the Hyperloop project. And now I'm in my free time. I working on the building Alexa skills and voice apps.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us. And I think today we are going to hear really great stories from you guys. And yeah, I would like to start from Jeffrey. Recently, you wrote a short article in the kind of group article on DZone about the DevOps challenges. And what I liked about the article, because I also personally could relate to that one, it's about how you simplify things for the developers in order to make it easy for them to actually get along with the DevOps culture. And yeah, I don't know if you can have any story from that, but I had a really good experience from that part of the article. So do you have any story to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined Tim Group about 8.5 years ago, and I'm from Silicon Valley. And I thought I had a very straightforward plan, which is to come over for a couple of years, do some hands-on DevOps work, and then go back to California. I'm still here 8.5 years later, so things didn't all go according to plan. But one part that did is when I started, I was very excited about exploring and pushing the boundaries of DevOps. So I have been in Agile for a long time. I used to be a programmer on the granddaddy of the sort of continuous integration tool, something called Cruise Control. Looking at my fellow panelists, none of you have enough gray hair maybe to remember that back in the early 2000s. And I also organized a conference called KitCon, the Continuous Integration and Testing Conference. And so I've really seen DevOps from the very beginning. Before there was something called DevOps, people were talking about end-to-end continuous integration. So I joined this company, and the idea was to really help move the tooling forward and help people really get to the value of DevOps, which really, in my mind, is not technical, but rather business enablement to help it make a company that was much better at product development, better at responding to the market. And the technical flexibility was one way to get there. So about 2012, I joined in 2011. In 2012, it was very clear the company needed to change how it was developing software. And in particular, we had to introduce several new products, which was a real change. And as a result, we wanted to make it easy for people to spin up a production-like environment on a new stack. And I think this is something that I've seen happen in a lot of different companies. You want to kind of standardize so you don't have hand-tuned machines all over the place. You want to have cookie cutter, this is our stack, this is the way things work. And then generally what you can systematize gets larger and larger. And for us, we got to the point where you could very easily go in, use our configuration management tool, and spin up an entire stack in multiple environments. So you could have it in development and staging and production, and have databases there, and have redundancy there, and failover, and it was all great. Now, there's an interesting thing that happens, though, when you make something cheaper. Just like supply and demand in the marketplace, people use it more often. So we had, in a sense, a victim of our own success, that people made it was very easy for people to spin up new environments and new applications, and that had the business effect we wanted, which is we created a bunch of new customer-facing applications and had the commercial success we were looking for. On the other hand, we also had a lot of we didn't have a good control over what was happening. And for a couple of years, we realized, oh my gosh, we have 800 VMs running. And this is about the time that some of those wonderful security patches came out, like Heartbleed and all of these things. We realized, oh my God, we have to patch 800 virtual machines. And as easy as it is for us to create new environments, we don't really have a good way to go back and retrofit old ones and patch them. And we realized that we had succeeded ourselves into a real corner. Now, the good news is the culture that we put in place, and I think it's always important to remember that DevOps is one of the foundational elements, is the cultural practices, the collaboration. And collaboration, by the way, means conflict. Collaboration means you have productive conflict between ideas, to people with different points of view disagreeing and working through those differences. So we were able to have an environment where people could say, look, we have problems, we need to address this, and have buy-in from lots of different people through buy-in as a result of argumentation. No one buys into a solution unless they feel they've been heard, unless they've had their objections heard. And so the challenge we had was, how are we going to address this? And there was some concern. A lot of people felt the business will never allow us to actually dig ourselves out of this hole. There'll always be pressure for new applications, new business value, and why would they ever give us the time and space to do it? But actually, through this sort of culture of argumentation, open concerns, and sharing and making trade-offs together, we've been able to prioritize this. Now, this has been a long process. This has been something that's been in works for us for a couple of years, but it's led to a shift of how we architect our applications. So our stuff is not in the cloud. We're one of those holdouts that actually have a data center, but we know that that's not the future. So we've been migrating to Kubernetes, and in part thinking about how to make a environment that's more maintainable, that doesn't have the same overhead and exposure that we have in our old environment. And currently we have OKRs every quarter about how many of the old systems we want to shut off. And the good news for this quarter, for Q2, we're well ahead of target. In fact, we just turned off one of our applications that took off about 30 of our VMs went away. And so we're very happily making our way through that backlog. And I think it's been a very interesting journey as we've made sort of one sort of technical investment and had success, and then able to have the same kind of discussion about, well, what do we do now to start a new course, and are having success with that. So that's my DevOps story. Sometimes success can make its own challenge for the future, but if you have the right culture, then you can find your way forward out of them.
Yeah, I like that. To me also, the DevOps is more about the people and the culture and the communication. The conversation is happening within this journey, actually. Yeah, I like the story, same as your article. Yeah.
Well, thanks. So, and hopefully other people that resonates with them, especially this idea that productive collaboration means productive conflict. I think that's something that's a place where a lot of people fall down.
Yeah, that's true. So I
Jeffrey,
heard about
one way I've heard it described before is people talk about collaboration, not cooperation. So it's really this, what you've described, right? Is it's not just kind of cooperating for the sake of it, but actually really understanding the kind of differences of opinion, and then kind of going through the process of really kind of analyzing them thoroughly, and having everyone have an opportunity to kind of have their say, and then you kind of get the best outcome by bringing those best ideas together.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The idea that the failure modes of collaboration are either unproductive conflict between people, as opposed to conflict between ideas, or on the other hand, when people are afraid of conflict, then you end up with groupthink. People aren't afraid to express their differences, and as a result, you end up with no buy-in and worse decisions.
Yeah. I think that's key pieces around the ideas, right? The argumentation around the ideas rather than the individuals themselves. I think sometimes what happens in large organizations, particularly who really value kind of a lot of upfront analysis and a lot of kind of planning work, is that people and ideas kind of then get inextricably linked, and then it's very hard to challenge a conventional wisdom or idea because it's kind of linked to someone's intellectual effort that's already kind of happened. So trying to create a culture that allows people to explore and debate those things is very healthy and very it's probably lacking a little bit in some of the bigger, more traditional enterprises. So.
I think so, and I think a lot of it because people have the mistaken idea that a good working relationship is one without conflict. Yeah. They say that they look at harmony, superficial harmony, the fact that people aren't arguing, people get along, and they tend to value that, not understanding they're missing out. The whole point is you want the strength through diversity. Sure. Diversity of opinions, diversity of experiences, diversity of ideas, and superficial harmony actually works against that.
Yeah, for sure.
So like Blake mentioned, Justin, you had a nice story. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I probably had a little bit of a different experience than the normal DevOps experience. So my last job was actually working with a military contractor. So in the realm of Department of Defense kind of work and that kind of contracting, most of the technologies that we use have to be approved ahead of time, get NSA approval for good reason. We're working in a secure environment. So they're very hesitant to add in any new types of what they consider to be fads because they haven't been proven yet. So one of the components we were working on required a pretty self-contained piece of software. So that was my main focus at my last job. And I realized that I was writing this software, but there's no way to test it except to put it on the actual hardware. So normally what we would done is make a change, you check it in, you kind of you spot check it, maybe have a peer review, and then you honestly hope for the best until you go to actually test this, and then you troubleshoot it and debug it while you're actually on the hardware itself. So what I ended up doing was just taking my own personal laptop or my work laptop, and I think I installed, there's some open source pipeline that allowed you to just watch a Git repo, and then you just execute a bunch of different stages of the pipeline. And I just honestly took whatever sample code I had, wrote a couple of tests, and then just started to build from there. And one of the things I realized was there wasn't much buy-in usually from the management because, again, unproven technology. And from their point of view, they haven't seen a increase in performance, or they haven't seen a cost and time. So the onus is on me to prove that to them that this piece of technology was worth it. So over the next couple of weeks, I started just continuing to use it. And we ended up realizing that the code they were writing was pretty stable. Every time it went on the actual hardware, for the most part, it was working. And that's not a testament to necessarily my ability to write code. That's more of I caught those errors that I had earlier on. So these errors didn't make it and, waste our time in the lab when we're writing, trying to debug things and trying to, pick certain wires or look for, certain signals off the board. We spent most of that time debugging things in the development phase. So as that pipeline went, the way we had set up was that you check in your code and run our tests. And a lot of these were just end-to-end tests and maybe some unit test on critical parts. And then it would host this binary on my laptop. And then I would take that binary and push it to the hardware. Besides the benefit of the testing ahead of time, we also got the ability to, if one day somebody came over to my cubicle and said, hey, I need to get the latest stuff and run it on the hardware, I was able to just pull that binary from wherever it was hosted from this pipeline and immediately walk into the lab and put it on that hardware. But the main lesson I learned, and the thing honestly that kind of changed how I looked at DevOps, was I kind of just assumed everyone knew there was a benefit to it and everyone could see this brand benefit of reduced cost, reduced time to production. Your tests are failing earlier, so you're not spending as much time like we were in the lab, fixing these things. But from a management point of view, they had never seen this before. So there was hesitancy to add this new technology and use it. So I had the responsibility of proving to them that we can reduce our development time by 20% or whatever the specific numbers would be for a project. And I also learned that a lot of times you look at these DevOps tools and we look at these DevOps techniques, and we think of them on a grand scale. So we think of, setting up a build server, having some sort of pipeline that's always available at our company. And because I was forced to take it from a small perspective, I just installed all this stuff on my work laptop. So it wasn't perfect, so you wouldn't be able to, have a build while my laptop wasn't on. But you should start to work the same way we do with code, iteratively in small pieces. You take that first step, and then the management says, hey, look, it's no cost to us to have you running this on your laptop, and it's all secure, so we don't have to put a money investment in there. So they're a lot more willing to buy into it. So just to sum up that whole experience years down the road, it was kind of just learning that you could take small steps to make DevOps go into a company, even if it's a 1 or 2% increase in your ability to do what we consider DevOps. And also you'd have to prove to people that this is worth it, because in some cases it may not be for them. If it was going to cost them $10,000 to set up a server for our budget on that project, that may not be worth it to them. It was probably better to just code it and test it in the lab, and the hours lost is maybe less than the cost and the time it takes for us to learn those technologies.
Yeah, that was a nice story. But to be honest, this is one of the most common issues within most of the companies. I could tell you that most of the time they are looking for the DevOps engineers while they don't know anything about the DevOps. That's why as a DevOps engineer, you have to have a kind of marketing skills and constantly trying to convince the managers to use a technology, which for you, it's out of the question, but for them, it's always a matter of a lot of criteria you have to actually satisfy. So yeah, I had a similar situation all the time.
Right. And just from a learning experience, like at the time, I didn't know all these technologies or all these different tools that, set up your own pipeline or set this stuff up. And I had this idea in my head that it was, a big hurdle to get there. And just installing one piece of software and getting one test to run a pipeline, that's better than not. And I think that when we ended up on that project, maybe there was 60 or 80% coverage, but if you look at that from like a perfect world, you're like, oh, you need 100% coverage on everything. That's still better than we were. And it still increased our productivity by a noticeable amount. So sometimes you get hung up on the, perfect scenario where you have 100% coverage, we're 50% more productive. Even if you get 10% more productivity, that's still a step in the right direction. You start building off that.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. You have to start from somewhere, and then eventually you can grow with it. You cannot create a perfect solution in the first place.
Right.
So, James, what about you? What do you have today for us?
So I'd say I'd echo some of the things that Jeffrey was saying, actually. So I think a lot of my consulting work has been with senior leadership teams who maybe aren't very familiar with Agile or DevOps or kind of new and emerging patterns of kind of work and technology. And I guess I would say I kind of work as a bridge between the engineering community inside a large enterprise and then their most senior leadership, really to try and help emphasize and evangelize again around what is out there, what's available from a technology perspective, but also around some of the best practices and ways of working that, lots of the companies that some of the big traditional enterprises claim that they want to be like. A common thing that execs say to me is, oh, we want to be like Netflix, or we want to be like Amazon, or we want to be like Facebook, but they don't really understand like what it takes, the level of investment and the practices that are going on behind the scenes. So it's kind of quite superficial. So I spend a lot of my time really trying to coach and support the conversation that enables not just the technology teams themselves, but also kind of grow more philosophy around product-based thinking, try and breaking down functional silos and really try and be that kind of mirror for the executive team around if you really want to get to where you say you want to get to from a kind of technology perspective, but also a cultural perspective, then that actually means you have to make some significant changes. And I think I've been relatively successful in that in certain companies, but some companies that it takes a long time to kind of change and really kind of register a significant difference because they're just not kind of culturally ready for that. and also the incentives inside a company maybe not ready for that. So, big traditional enterprise will typically have like this, CFO and then a CRO and a CTO, and have all these functional silos, and these people all have their own targets and things that they need to deliver. It's then hard then to then get the teams underneath them to then work in kind of end-to-end value streams. So there's really a lot of education and thinking that has to go into the exec team to really kind of get them to start changing the way of working. Most of the successes I've had has been able to try and run small experiments with them. So something like, if they have an innovation area or some opportunity for an exemplar project where you can actually start with a greenfield team and you can build a team that is truly end to end. So from an idea all the way through to delivering value to an end customer, and showing the, through practice and through the actual people and the team and how they're organized, showing the executive team what's possible if you can actually get a, true end-to-end team in place. And then also bringing in the technology and the benefits of DevOps, CI/CD, cloud, all the kind of other things that we associate with DevOps from a technical perspective. But I'd say my focus is broader. And then in other companies, I've worked with teams where actually from a technology perspective, they're pretty capable and the teams already are relatively autonomous, using a lot of automation, already very invested into cloud, but they're still very technology focused, and people think about DevOps as a technical discipline inside a company. And for those companies, what I've tended to do is try and start to get the idea around, to start with just simple things like product ownership, maybe some form of UX or design starting to be embedded in the team, and then gradually expanding the scope and sphere of the team and the areas they cover in a kind of controlled way, so that executive team don't get too scared too quickly, but they can see the benefits starting to build up over time. And both those, there's many different ways and patterns that you can use to kind of introduce DevOps into a big organization. But I think for me, the way I have to do it is kind of like start small and then expand out. Try and come top down and too big bang with a company that doesn't really understand what it means is probably quite dangerous, and it's probably unlikely to be very successful, and actually might mean that companies take a bit of step back because they're scared of, the lack of progress, if you like.
What I like, James, about what you said is about in some companies, they actually limited the DevOps in the technical aspect.
Yep.
And then because of that, the DevOps, it's quite limited to some certain people. And then the more rest of the companies, they are thinking, okay, it's not something for them to do. And do you have such a similar situation in the company that they had just some DevOps engineers, but the rest of the companies were not really adapted to the DevOps culture?
Yeah, I think for traditional organizations, that's the first pattern that emerges. I think it was similar to the way Agile emerged. I think that many big traditional organizations think about DevOps and also Agile as technical or technology-driven disciplines, and they don't necessarily think that that fits the wider corporate model. So I think within big enterprises that have been around 40, 50, up to 200 or 300 years, I think that's probably the standard pattern. I would say it's more companies that have been created in the last 5 to 15 years, and maybe those that are much more see themselves as software and engineering companies. They're the ones where you'd have patterns around Agile and DevOps that would go across the whole organization. But they're changing, right? So there are enterprises now who've got kind of visionary CIOs and people in senior position who've seen it work in a different way, who are really trying to, radically change the way these companies work. I've worked with some big organizations where we've built new companies inside the overall corporate banner, and we've built them cloud native, Agile native, DevOps native, but they still exist in a wider organization that still has some parts of the journey still to go through.
True. I just look at the time, and I found that we have also Xavier here. So Xavier, what do you have for us today? The last story, maybe.
In that post, I was writing about the voice apps development currently in the moving the voice apps into the DevOps world. Those are my main the main things I love. So currently, the voice apps developer, I think that we are living something like the mobile developers lived in 2009, for example, when they start to build that kind of new software there in 2009. Today, we are starting with developing voice apps with Alexa, with Google, with Google Actions, Alexa and Google, and with Alexa Skills, Samsung with Bixby capsules. And it's so difficult to start building something new without any tools that can achieve quality gate or quality to build a software as a quality of a product. Now there are a lot of startups, small companies, I think called voice agencies, that are building software for a lot of customers, and they have to manage all the life cycle of a software. So they have to manage how to achieve that in an easy way. There are no so many tools in terms of voice development, and that's one of the tricky things that I have to pass through to achieve that kind of development. In that post, I was writing about a personal project, which is an entire DevOps pipeline within Alexa Skill. I've started from the scratch using Circle CI, and I've started from the unit test using specific Node.js framework for that unit test with Alexa Skills. And then I have written new stages in the pipeline, achieving all that kind of difficult things that I have to achieve, like integration test, because you have to test with an, I don't know how to say it, with a real Alexa, with a real Amazon Echo. I have to test it, and I achieve that with a tool called Bespoken. So with an easy YAML, for example, they can translate it into voice, and then they have robots that can test it. Sorry. And this is so difficult, but I think that I finished the pipeline. You can find all my post series. There are around 10, 11 posts talking about that. But yes, that's my last DevOps challenge.
Yeah, that was great. And are you going to also share this in a public repository or something?
Yeah, it is available in my GitHub, and I'm preparing some conferences to talk about it. Yes.
Okay, that would be great. So Blake, I don't know how much time do we have, and maybe we can have a last short round about the next week. Yeah, next week there is a big event, so we can ask from the people. Yeah, what is your plan for the next week as an attendant or as a speaker in the next in the first DevOps Summit, right, in the UK, I guess. So yeah. Everyone can start. Just what is your plan for the next week?
I'll be talking at the DevOps Enterprise Summit on Tuesday, talking about why people should dump the ceremonies and focus on conversations if they want to have their transformations work.
Oh, great. Looking forward to it. And James?
Yeah, so I'm keynoting on Tuesday also with a ex-colleague of mine from Swiss Re. She's head of compliance for a new internal startup, so an insurtech startup that we built. And we're just going to talk about our journey kind of from business case PowerPoint presentation 2.5 years ago through to kind of fully fledged company with policy holders and signing big distribution partners like IKEA and others. So just the whole story and our journey together, kind of working through that, building an insurance company from the ground up.
Okay, great. Awesome. And Justin?
Unfortunately, just from a work scheduling thing, I'm probably not going to be able to attend the conference, but I'm sure that Jeff and James can attest. There's great amount of content there, and I would suggest go and see if you could definitely get that scheduled in there.
Okay, nice. And Zoe?
I have a conference about Alexa and COVID on the coronavirus. So I'm preparing that presentation now.
Oh, that's great. So from myself also, I'm attending from DZone, and I'm quite excited to see what will be the new things I can learn from the DevOps. And I'm also looking forward to bring some of the messages from this summit as some maybe continuous articles for the DZone, because I can imagine many people either they are at work or they can not attend to this event. So we can also try to share as much as possible with the rest of the people from DZone. So I give my words to Blake now.
Yeah, great. Thanks everyone for your time today and for our first DevOps podcast. Hopefully everyone got something unique about this. Lots of great real world stories that we learned from the trenches. We didn't get into, Alireza, your kind of more theory. We got into like real world stuff because we all kind of have theory fatigue when we start hearing stuff like that in Agile or DevOps. So it's great to kind of hear everyone on the sort of the eve, the week before Gene Kim's big DevOps Enterprise Summit. So thanks for your time for our podcast. Any final thoughts from you, Alireza, on everything we learned today and takeaways?
Yeah, I'm really excited for today. I had one story to tell you guys, but I was more excited to listen to your stories. That's why I decided to wait to see if the time allows. But I'm really happy that today I learned a lot from you guys. I'm really interested. And as most of you said, specifically Jeffrey, DevOps is just about the people, about the collaboration. And I think this is a really great message. And I was thinking today, what we are doing in DevOps can be applied to any type of business, to be honest. Because to be honest, if you collaborate together, if you have a common agreement, if you find a common language, and if you can understand the conflict and then have respect for their opinion, at the same time try to work with each other, any project can be done. It's not just IT. But I think in the IT industry, we have a chance to practice a lot of different methodologies. And I'm happy to be part of this actually movement, on DZone. Yeah, thank you all, and I hope to see you soon again. And I'm looking forward for the DevOps Summit to see you guys there and learn more things from you.